Welcome back to the Solid Verbal, boys and girls. My name, as always, is Ty Hildenbrandt, that fine gentleman over there. Back where it all started on the West Coast, Dan Rubenstein, sir. I saw you tweeted out earlier that you made it, which is good because you were on one of the planes that's been in the news lately. But more notably, you wrenched your back picking up snacks, a very dad move on the aircraft, from what I could read online. Are you okay?
I did. I'm okay. You got to pack a lot of snacks when you have little ones, and it went awry. What do you want me to tell you? There were some pretzel thins, there were some Pirates booty shards, and I was probably too focused on this episode and just building the takes, Ty. And so it's on me. I'm all right. Got on my feet, and I'm doing all right.
No tears, though.
Only from me. The
Only
kids
from
were
you.
fine.
Okay.
We were delayed for an hour on the tarmac. It's been a long day, but I can't complain. Ty, I had a temperature flip of like negative 29 wind chill in the North Shore of Chicago to whatever the non-wind chill here is in California to it's like 64 degrees. So that's a pretty good swing.
That's a decent trade. You will make that trade. Welcome back, one and all. There is a lot to discuss here in the college football world. I am Ty. He is Dan. This, of course, is the Solid Verbal. If you like the cut of our jib, hit subscribe, hit follow, wherever it is you get your podcasts. We've got a lot to talk about. Look, we've got Kalen DeBoer hired by Bama. We contemplated going live to talk about it last week, but we figured we'll give it a little bit more opportunity to run its course because with Kalen DeBoer leaving Washington, that meant Washington was looking for somebody. There's this whole domino effect. So Kalen DeBoer hired by Alabama, Jedd Fisch hired away from Arizona, is going to be the new coach at Washington. We're obviously going to talk about that. Looming in the background, we've got the Jim Harbaugh stuff. We are recording this on Monday. At time of recording, he was reportedly talking to the Chargers at some point earlier today. J.J. McCarthy went pro. Caleb Williams went pro. Just a lot of news that we got to tie up here on the episode today. I guess we should first start, though, with the Kalen DeBoer stuff, since that seems to be the biggest news in the college football world. So just a few short days ago, Kalen DeBoer playing for national championship, coaching the Washington Huskies. They, of course, lose to Michigan. Kalen DeBoer, a few days later, removed from that after the Nick Saban shockwave hit that he was retiring. Kalen DeBoer announced as the next Alabama coach. So, look, this is a guy who's been pretty accomplished in his coaching career. He won 3 NAIA championships when he was coaching Sioux Falls back in the aughts. Career record overall as a head coach, including his time at Fresno, of course, including his time at Washington, 104-12. Guy's pretty accomplished. Everywhere he's been, he's won. The track record is there. What was your initial take on hearing Kalen DeBoer? Any surprises for you?
No, and his name was one that came up, of course, with the Texas A&M search a little bit ago, and that didn't really go terribly far, it seems. And so, look, it's not a surprise because he's not the first coach to maximize his opportunities when his stock seemingly would be at an all-time high. And when you take a program like Washington, which hasn't been to a national championship game or in a national championship scenario. They go to the playoff in 2016, of course, but since essentially the early 90s, unless I'm forgetting something, that you do something that impressive and you pull out the wins that Washington's able to do and have a Heisman caliber quarterback in Michael Penix and all these NFL receivers and a defense that grows over the course of these seasons, have coordinators in demand. Ryan Grubb, of course, got Alabama interest last year, turned it down to be a very highly paid offensive coordinator this past fall, that you're never really surprised when somebody's like, look, it's not going to get hotter for my irons, if I'm mixing metaphors here, than it is right now. So no, that part of it can't be a surprise. Even though 2 years, Washington's still a pretty major place. It's disappointing because in a world where you don't have a ton of continuity, be it coaches, be it players, be it conferences, whatever, 2 years is still pretty short. And so he was a couple years at Fresno. He was at Indiana before that as a coordinator, did a great job, and does a great job at Washington. Doesn't have the direct roots to the South. Obviously, the Alabama job, and we talked about this a little bit when Nick Saban decided to retire and resign, it's both an excellent and terrible job at the same time.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. That was going to be my next question. because I think that is an interesting conversation to have. Like, is this a good job? How good of a job is this? We know that there are resources. We know that they care about football. We know that they're willing to invest whatever. Money is really no option. But the whole following in the footsteps of a legend thing.
Yeah.
That's where it gets weird, man. You know, like that, you could be the best coach other than Nick Saban, and you still got to live in that shadow. I mean, he said all the right stuff, right? He's a very likable guy. I don't think he's going to have a hard time getting along with people in Tuscaloosa and at Alabama. Just, you know, in general, like, people loved him at Washington. He was a very strong culture guy. He didn't have issues with guys transferring out. People, by all accounts, wanted to play for this guy, wanted to work for this guy. Yeah. But it's just this thing now of, unless you win 6 national championships, you're constantly going to have to answer to, am I doing enough? Am I as good as the guy before me? And that's just a really hard spot to be. Like, he knows what he's getting himself into by taking this gig. But that's just always going to be lingering in the backs of Alabama fans' minds. And that's really not fair to anybody. It's just the unfortunate reality that he's going to now have to deal with on a day-to-day.
So if we back up a little bit, because I think you're right. If we back up a little bit, Kalen DeBoer has won a ton. I saw the number that after his first 10 games anywhere, his record is 80-3. Did you see that?
I did.
Yeah. Which is obviously, these are like Chris Peterson type numbers when you get down to how comical of a winner Kalen DeBoer is. Here's the thing. Here's why it kind of makes sense to me. And I don't know Kalen DeBoer. I haven't spent time deeply digging into his Sioux Falls career, though I did see the clip of Washington players watching him like Moss dudes when he was a college football player. And like, they seem to be super into it, which is nice. It's a good reflection. The way I look at it is, I think Kalen DeBoer is just uninterested and unconcerned and unbothered by the idea of legacy. Right? That, like, if he cared about his own personal legacy, he probably wouldn't leave Washington after 2 years, because it's not the greatest short-term look for him to quickly build Washington into a national power, win a playoff game over a clear blue blood in Texas, far away from the West Coast. And then, I mean, it was relatively close against Michigan for a good stretch of that game. Like, if Washington were a little bit better, we might be talking about Washington as a national champion. Michigan's just clearly better than Washington. But his style of play, going downfield, going to receivers, and that's just the way the team was built. But like, the aggression involved, like, there is something, he leaves Fresno quickly, where I'm not saying he's a bad guy at all. He strikes me as somebody that is kind of a screw it, why not? Let's go see what we can do. Let's go take it to some teams. You know, we're down 3 late. Screw it. Let's get creative and run an end around. Whatever it is. Like, that's the kind of attitude that, like, I think if you start thinking too big picture, that like, oh, how am I going to follow Nick Saban? How am I going to, like, win in the SEC? All these players, like, I just think Kalen DeBoer just wants to coach football. I think he wants to find a bunch of good football players, coach football, and the noise, the outside stuff, the goobers like you, the goobers like me saying like, well, he didn't really recruit that well at Washington. Well, how is he going to adjust to coaching in the South? Well, how is he going to coach against Kirby Smart or Brian Kelly? Like, I think he's like a national championship underthinker. Yeah. He's like, I don't know, football's football. I'm going to find some dudes. I'm going to coach them up. I'll bring Ryan Grubb with me to call more plays downfield. We'll find some receivers. We'll find a guy who can throw it. And we'll give their 11 our best shot with our 11. And in a way, it's almost perfect, because there's not a single human who can come close right now. I mean, Kirby Smart has started, but come close to what Nick Saban has accomplished. So it's almost like a relief that, like, oh, I can't possibly live up to Nick Saban, so why don't we just coach some football and see what happens?
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up, because I remember, and it's, of course, around here, it's the type of story that you hear. I want to say it was Lenny Dykstra. Now,
yeah,
maybe problematic after his baseball career, but
perhaps.
However, when he played, had the nickname Nails. When he played, had a pretty strong knack for coming through. And they talked to teammates and said, what's Lenny Dykstra's secret? And it was just that. It was, we don't really know what's going on upstairs. It may not be much, but we know he is not worried about the things that a lot of other people are worried about. He just underthinks the hell out of it. And maybe that blindness to some of the other things that caused noise for us didn't work on him. And that's how he was able to perform on the baseball diamond. Now, I don't know if that extends to Kalen DeBoer. He seems like a pretty sharp dude, but if he's got that outlook on coaching, and if it is really a matter of, I don't care about the legacy, I don't care about following the legend, Alabama's a special place. Alabama's got obviously resources that are attractive to nearly anybody, whether it's in terms of infrastructure or roster, you name it. I mean, Alabama's got a lot of those things at your disposal. It's just a matter of following in the footsteps. And is that going to have an effect on any kind of longevity? Were you surprised that they went with Kalen DeBoer? Did that surprise you at all?
A little bit. Obviously, the coaches that seem to have the most success in the SEC, and maybe this is bunching it a little bit too broadly, but seem to have experience in the South, whether it's as a coordinator, whether it's as a coach at a smaller place in the South, like Billy Napier making the move from Louisiana to Florida. There's, we're Kirby Smart, Georgia to Alabama. All these guys, a lot of them have experience at some point, have the recruiting connections in the South, and certainly like Washington has recruited players from Texas from all over the place that, they can point to. And I think Jalen Polk was at Texas Tech when he transferred to Washington. Look, this is kind of a stretch here.
Yeah.
So Alabama being like the quintessential SEC school, you'd think like, oh, they're going to go after one of their own, which maybe, they seem to have a lot of interest in Steve Sarkisian, a lot of interest in Dan Lanning, Mike Norvell, guys who have coached in the Southeastern footprint, which makes sense. You also have to just find a guy who's going to say yes. And it didn't seem like those three guys were terribly close to saying yes. And so from their perspective, it's like somebody who has high level. He's won a major conference. He won a playoff game against a soon-to-be SEC power, perhaps, with the way Texas has recruited and played recently.
No.
And you still look at Kalen DeBoer as somebody who checks a lot of boxes. And I think you get into trouble with the overthinking stuff with recruiting. Like I think Alabama is still a huge brand without Nick Saban, though a different kind of brand without Nick Saban. And so Alabama's going to get recruits on campus. They're going to have unofficial visits. They're going to have official visits. He's going to have an opportunity to wine and dine and sell the new Alabama program. But yeah, I think part of it was like, what was the recruiting reason why Washington was so far away from capitalizing on its on-field success these past couple years? Was it disinterest? Was it not investing resources and building out a recruiting department at Washington? Was it lack of an aggressive staff? Like the staff maybe should have been built differently. We talked about it a couple times during the season. Maybe it was, I don't know if it was on the show, off the show, that like Washington's kind of recruiting like Kalen DeBoer doesn't plan on being there for much longer.
Yeah.
Because there doesn't seem to be like a ton of urgency. They were nowhere near where Chris Peterson had this Washington recruiting operation. And so that was something that struck me as a little bit off, but I don't think you have a choice but to pour a ton of blood, sweat, and tears into recruiting at Alabama. And so he'll be there for a year if he recruits like he did at Washington, no matter how good of an X's and O's and motivator he is. This is not a program that wants to finish with the 12th best recruiting class in the nation. And that's fully not acceptable for Alabama, given the track record. So a little bit surprised,
no.
But also they weren't going to grab a coordinator. They probably weren't going to grab somebody who's in their 60s or 70s, right? This is a job that's looked at, rightfully so, as a long-term job. Like, who's the next guy to build the next dynasty at Alabama after the coaches who, have done a ton in Tuscaloosa? So, no, not a terrible surprise on either end. And from DeBoer's end, it's not even just the underthinking thing. Like, when you coach at small schools, when you're working your way up through Eastern Michigan, through Indiana, all due respect to 9-win Indiana, and to what Washington was and what they became under Kalen DeBoer, and Ohio State, Alabama, Texas, USC, any of these types of jobs come up, I don't think you wait. I don't think you say, oh, well, I have another year at Washington. And like, I think there's a certain idea of like, these opportunities don't come around all that often. And look, I've been on the other end of this, rooting for Oregon with Mario Cristobal and Chip Kelly and all these guys who have left. But like, from DeBoer's standpoint, like, the University of Alabama wants me to be their coach? Yeah.
I don't blame a guy for trying to get a better opportunity for himself, for his family, Everybody's got their reasons. Everyone's reasons are a little bit different. Obviously, Alabama has the resources and the infrastructure. I was a little bit surprised that they didn't go for somebody with more Bama connections. That part surprised me. We know that there were flirtations with Dan Lanning. Dan Lanning, your boy, made a recruiting video out of it, which I thought was masterful. He did a great job.
It's great.
Sark sort of did the same thing. Mike Norvell ended up getting a pay increase. I mean, there were some names, really just a handful. We knew it had to be one of those guys, if only because who's Bama going to go after?
Well, and there was nobody internal, too.
There's nobody internal.
Kevin Steele's old.
Tommy Rees got an interview. They weren't going to hire Tommy Rees. Just that was not going to happen. The question that I have now is, and I saw some folks online referencing this, and I think it really is the key point now, the key takeaway. Great. He's got the job. They've got the resources. They've got the infrastructure. What does that operation look like when it is not in the name of Nick Saban? When NIL,
well, and also when guys aren't necessarily,
I
was just going to say, when guys aren't necessarily taking an NIL discount to play for Nick Saban, as the rumors have swirled, has been the case. That this has been a program and this has been a scene behind the scenes that has said, no, we're Alabama. We don't pay premium, right? We are the premium.
Right.
And so
we will put you in the NFL,
like?
Right? We have the greatest coach of all time. And so to not have that recruiting, that built-in recruiting pitch, I think makes for a much more interesting conversation. Now, this guy's won everywhere. He's won everywhere. And Bama's, I think, a horse of a different color. It is not exactly the same as anywhere else he's ever been. The pressure will be amped up to 1,000. But that's really my only question about this. He's going to put a good offense on the field. He's got talent. I suspect there will be transfers. There have already been transfers and decommitments and that sort, but clearly the talent is still going to be among the best in college football. It's still the Bama roster. It's just a matter of sustainability moving forward. And if he doesn't come out of the gate hot, if he doesn't build a name for himself initially, do we see some of that momentum start to peter off? I don't know. That'll be fascinating.
I mean, look, how he builds out his staff. It looks like there's already a couple of Alabama assistants who are going to stay. Georgia hired away T-Rob, the defensive backs coach, Varys Robinson, and he came back to interview for the defensive coordinator job, but has opted to stay as a co-DC and DB's coach of some kind at Georgia. So he is making that move, and he was, he is super well regarded in the assistant world. And so what does he do? What does he do in terms of continuity? Who does he bring in to run the program? Like from a GM, player personnel type standpoint, strength and conditioning standpoint, there's a lot yet to be, at the time we're recording this, a lot to be decided. And so, yeah. And we can talk about Kalen DeBoer all we want, but like, leaving behind a team who just played for a national championship, we can both understand why Kalen DeBoer made the move he made, but also say, like, kind of unprecedented to take off after this much success. I think he lost twice before the national championship, and they were both last year. It was UCLA and I think ASU. And so winning as much as he did at Washington, so a place that can foster winning for him. Yeah. And yes, they're losing a ton. They were going to lose a ton even if he were coming back next year, and not most of which, obviously, the offensive guys, the receivers, Michael Penix, what have you, and the offensive linemen. But, man, to bring a team that far and say, I've used you up for my needs, and I am moving on to a bigger, better place, it's a pretty sour look.
Well, let's talk about Jedd Fisch then, shall we? Shall we talk about Jedd Fisch?
I want your opinion. I want your opinion of Kalen DeBoer and how he left Washington.
Well,
and how that left you feeling.
Well, I mean, I compared how Jedd Fisch left and how Kalen DeBoer left.
Sure.
And
okay.
I think there is some overlap between those two. Now, when Kalen DeBoer left, he gave like a tearful 10-minute farewell to his team. It was a bunch of gobbledygook. Somebody leaked it on the internet. I listened to the whole thing. Yeah. But it was heartfelt and it was genuine, and you could tell that he was moved by it. Now, in fairness,
he was also like kind of word salad-y.
It was word salad. It was total word salad.
It was like, it's out of my control. Like, what are you talking about now?
It was total word salad. It was total word salad. The Jedd Fisch one actually is the one that really rubbed me the wrong way. Like, I totally get if there are coaches out there who maybe don't care about the legacy and don't care what people think of them jumping around and going to a bunch of different places to to try and win something, right? You brought up Kalen
Yeah.
DeBoer a couple weeks ago, and you're like, this guy was at Sioux Falls. To now have a run at Bama or another prestigious job like that, you can almost understand where he's coming from, right? Like,
Sure.
Like you said earlier, Bama wants me. Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Like,
and Washington is a huge job, to be clear.
Sure.
It's a huge job. It's just not Bama.
it's not Bama, and very few places are. The Jedd Fisch one, to me, though, left a really bad taste in my mouth for a couple reasons. First off, there was a line, and I know you saw it. There was a line in the Brett McMurphy tweet when he announced that this thing was done, that something to the effect that getting Jedd Fisch a new deal wasn't a priority with the school. And I get it. Arizona's had some budgeting issues. I think Arizona was the school that had the $240 million mistake or miscalculation in their budget, right? It's been a very weird time in the Pac-12 for a multitude of reasons. But this just struck me as big-time agent speak. Big-time agent speak because this is a school that also just left the Pac-12, played part and parcel to the Pac-12 disintegrating so that they could get more football money, more athletic money. So it sounds like he's getting more at Washington, 7.75 something versus 5.5, whatever Arizona offered him. So he clearly took a pay raise. Again, I don't fault anybody for trying to get a better situation for themselves, for their family, better opportunity, whatever. Like do what you want. Who am I? But that part felt like BS, that there was not a priority on the football side. The second thing, and I mentioned Kalen DeBoer's 10-minute tearful speech. By all accounts, Jedd Fisch gave a 3-minute auctioneer speech.
25% attendance.
Right.
Supposedly.
It wasn't a full Brian Kelly where he made the team come in at 7 a.m. for it. So I guess that's good. But, like, it's so easy to be cynical about this sport in this day and age. We tend to hand wave stuff like this all the time because it's business, blah, blah, blah. It's business, business, business. I refuse to let myself get so cynical that I just gloss over these sorts of things.
Sure.
I have no problem, again, with anyone taking an opportunity that they feel is better for them personally, for them professionally. But after building a relationship with these players, leading a historic rebuild over the last 3 seasons, to allot 1 minute per season, that's a freaking cop-out, man. That leaves a bad taste in my... At least act like it means something, you know? Like, give these guys a little bit more of your time than just 3 minutes. Either it's a cop-out or it's somebody who's way too good at leaving. And Jedd Fisch has been at 11 teams between the NFL and college football.
Yeah, I saw it. 10, 11. It's like 10 and 16 years or something. Yeah.
So look, again, you do you. Maybe he doesn't care about legacy either. He doesn't care what people think. I don't know Jedd Fisch. Everybody who knows him says he's got a great vibe. He's a likable guy. I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. But my number one concern, because I know we're going to get there with this hire for Washington, I think Jedd Fisch is a good coach. I also think if Florida opens up next year, he's gone again. He's going to Florida. He went to Florida as an undergrad just so that he could maybe work his way up and work under Steve Spurrier. He was that big of a fan. If that job's open next year, if they decide they're cutting bait with Billy Napier, he's gone again. That's my problem with Jedd Fisch.
Okay, so here's the other part of it. In addition, yes, and part of it.
Right.
For a lot of these guys, right? Okay, so for Kalen DeBoer, the AD that hired him left for USC.
Fair.
So the guy, he said, I want to work at this school for this person, and Jen Cohen left for USC, and Washington hired the Tulane guy in the middle of the year, I believe, this past season. And so there are things behind the scenes. I don't know what percent of the public knows or the attentive public knows. My guess is like 16%, right? That like you don't know about somebody's interpersonal relationships at a place. You don't know how somebody's family geographically likes that place. You don't know a lot of sort of the extraneous or of like the very important things that are just behind closed doors for these places that like maybe it was just Seattle was not the place for Kalen DeBoer and his family to live. I'm guessing. I have no idea. I've been to Seattle. And I really like Seattle. And the same could be true of Jedd Fisch in Arizona. The fact that he seems to be constantly climbing. And I know he was an interim coach at UCLA, so he had to leave after I think it was Jim Mora was let go. So he's UCLA, he's Michigan, he's Miami, he is both with the Rams, Ravens, like he's all over the place in the NFL.
I've got it right here. Texans, Broncos, Seahawks, Jaguars, Rams, and Patriots in the NFL. And then on the college side, Florida as a GA where he started under Spurrier.
Yeah.
Minnesota, Miami, UCLA, and then was hired most recently as the head coach for Arizona.
Yeah, and I know he interviews for a time. Remember, I think Mario Cristobal interviewed him for an Oregon offensive coordinator job that went to Joe Moorhead. It's hard to ignore. It's hard to ignore with Jedd Fisch. And I've heard similarly positive, good things about Jedd Fisch as a person. Like, two things I suppose can be true for once. He's a good hang, but also he's looking for the next thing a lot. And so here, the interesting thing will be what do his now former players at Arizona think of him leaving? How many will follow him? I think I saw Jonah Coleman, running back, entered the portal today as we record this, and all eyes are going to be on T-Mac at receiver and Noah Fafita, the quarterback who emerged this year. Jayden DeLora, I think, has already transferred out. And so, like, how many guys follow him to Washington, or what are they able to do quickly in the portal? I saw... what's his name? Rogers already transferred out of Washington.
Yeah.
Will Rogers. And so what does the roster construction look like? And how easy is it now, Washington, new Big Ten school, or to be a Big Ten school shortly, how easy is it now, or how much easier will it be for whoever, Ryan Day, whoever's at Michigan, Dan Lanning, Lincoln Riley, Troy Taylor, anybody who's recruiting against Washington, be like, you think Jedd Fisch is going to be there next year? Yeah. You think he's going to be there for your bowl game this year? Like, it becomes easier and easier to recruit against that type of coach, right? That Dan Lanning, all these guys can sell. I'm sticking around. I've had offers. And that, when you start getting bigger and bigger jobs, that's the kind of thing that can be used against you more and more. And it seems that everything coming out of Tucson, which, by the way, he got that program to a great place.
10-3.
This is an emerging program. Have you seen Arizona's schedule this year?
Yeah.
Like, this seems like it would have been the worst year to leave. I saw that Johnny Nansen, one of their best recruiters, he leaves for Texas for, I think, a co-DC job. But kind of all eyeballs were pointed to 2024 for Arizona football.
Coming into
I don't know, man.
Coming into the Big 12, we talked about this too earlier this year. It was there for them. It's a conference that you look at it, there are some teams that are entering from the West. Arizona is certainly one of them. Utah, I think, is another.
Yeah, ASU's going to be better this year, as they're healthier. Yeah.
Some of those new additions certainly could sneak their way into the title hunt in the new Big 12, however many teams we got now, 18. It's there for them. I was surprised a little bit on that front because we had heard for an eternity about Jedd Fisch because of that strong connection to Florida, that if and when Florida comes open, Jedd Fisch is a name. And there were people who were posting on Florida message boards shortly after this hire. Florida people were upset because they're already done with Napier. A lot of them are anyway.
They had sort of penciled in.
And Jedd Fisch seemed like maybe a guy they'd go after given the connection there. That doesn't mean you can't get him, guys. You probably have to pay a pretty hefty buyout, but it doesn't mean you can't get him if you want him, because this guy's got that track record. I don't know. I'm surprised that it happened when it did. I'm not surprised.
Also, by the way, think about how old is Jedd Fisch? You can look 47. This up as I'm. So he's 47. So he's been coaching since he was in college. So 25 years, which he's not ancient, obviously. He's middle-aged. You get your first shot to be a head coach at a pretty huge place, and 2-3 years. This is a first shot. It's like, I don't know. It seems like Jedd Fisch at Washington and his agent, whoever, might already be thinking about that next job.
Probably.
Right? What can we turn this? It seems especially transactional with him.
They have 18 of 22 starters coming back next year, and a schedule that is workable, going into a new conference that is gettable. All the arrows felt like they were pointed to next season for Arizona.
Sure.
Truly one of the more exciting stories coming into the year if the coach doesn't leave, and now maybe who knows what happens with the roster. So I'm disappointed on that level. I get that these things go on, But
Yeah.
I've got the bad taste in my mouth, and I think it's really hard to ignore that blinking red light of this dude's resume. He's been everywhere. Might be a nice guy.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's a nice guy. People like playing for him. He obviously was a pretty good coach. But if another job opens up that he wants more, how long is he at Washington? I don't know. That worries
By the way,
me.
and they're what, a hair away from beating USC in overtime this past year at USC. It required like an A++ effort from Caleb Williams to pull that game out. So then you're talking about 11 wins. Like, he was successful in the portal. He was making inroads in, the LA, Southern California area. Like, Arizona's a very attractive, it's a warm place. Like, the vibes are good. There might not be a lot of money, which certainly plays a role, I suppose. But like, it was a big time place that was, as you just said, like, it was one of the great stories of the 2023 season. And just like, to leave that goodwill behind, to go to an empty roster in Seattle, I don't know, man. It just seems like very short-term thinking.
Yeah, and Washington was put in a bit of a pickle given the timing
Totally.
of all this. I don't
Roster's decimated, and they needed somebody, yeah.
I don't fault Washington one iota for going out and trying to get somebody in, especially Jedd Fisch. Jedd Fisch is viewed as a rising star in the coaching world. So I don't fault Washington for this one bit. They decided they didn't want Ryan Grubb. Sounds like Ryan Grubb's going to end up with Kalen DeBoer anyway down in Alabama.
Yeah.
But Jedd Fisch, your guy at Washington. Now, the Arizona thing is still ongoing at time of recording. I have picked up notes of this being basically a mess right now. The latest tweet I saw was maybe Brent Brennan, maybe some players want to bring back Johnny Nansen. More to come.
Brennan Carroll's name came up, but I think he's following Jedd Fisch to Seattle. Yeah, Pete Carroll's son. Yep.
More to come on the Arizona front. That is not a bad situation. It's going to be a challenge, I think, to keep that roster intact. That's going to be the hard part. But, certainly going into the Big 12 now with the schedule, with the whole conference being in flux, if you don't lose too much, you can maybe stand to plug some of those gaps in the interim. The other big story that is sort of emerging, and it hasn't really come to a full boil yet. There have been plenty of rumors out there about Jim Harbaugh talking with the Chargers today, reported interest from the Raiders, potential interest from the Commanders. We're not NFL guys here, but certainly this would have a pretty big impact, again, late in the game on the college football coaching carousel front. Certainly with recruiting, with where things go. Saw J.J. McCarthy did declare for the NFL draft, as did Blake Corum. Two guys won't be playing for Michigan next season. McCarthy's a very interesting prospect. We will have folks on who can help us dissect where he stands in the pecking order. I also saw Bruce Feldman, our friend from The Athletic, put out a column talking about which direction Michigan might go if Harbaugh does, in fact, leave. Sharon Moore seems to be the obvious name that would inherit things in Ann Arbor, given his recent track record towards the end of the season when he filled in for Harbaugh. Some other names that Bruce mentions, Lance Leipold from Kansas, seemingly in the mix of all of these coaching searches at this point. Chris Kleiman.
Name came up with Washington, Lance Leipold, and he sort of emphatically said, so excited to have our 2024 guys on campus with, big things ahead kind of thing.
So Lance Leipold, no surprise there. Chris Kleiman, no surprise there. Another name that wouldn't surprise me to hear him come up in accordance with other jobs as they come open over the next few seasons. He also mentioned Brian Kelly, which would be something else for him to move away from LSU. I don't know how much I'm buying that, but Bruce has better sources than we do. So more to come on that front. Certainly, if the Harbaugh news breaks, that's another one of those break glass in case of situations for you and I. But that would seemingly be the next big domino to fall if indeed it does.
Yeah, no, it'll be fascinating, not just to see if and when Sharon Moore gets the job, but what does that staff look like? We've already seen, as you mentioned, guys declare, a couple guys deciding to come back to Michigan, to see what the recruiting class ends up looking like in this cycle, with obviously the normal signing day, the regular signing day still a couple weeks out. And so how much of it is continuity from the Harbaugh era and how much of it is Sharon Moore's own or whoever's stamp on the program because they've recruited well, but not in like a killer way. But it didn't matter because they developed guys so well and they had such a clear identity. Obviously, now you're reigning national champions. So fascinating job. And, obviously there's the off-field stuff and waiting to hear about anything from, any governing body about the scouting stuff. But I don't know, man. I think that's probably a short-term thing anyway. Huge, enormous job as we go into this new era.
Yeah. And like I said before, the news that JJ McCarthy is leaving, I think, is also somewhat significant on that front. I mean, JJ, talk about a polarizing prospect. I mean, definitely the kind of guy who I think you would want as the face of your franchise. Because if you've ever seen him on camera, there are very few college athletes in the game today that are as comfortable and fluid on camera as JJ McCarthy. Like, if the football thing doesn't work out, he can easily be a broadcaster probably tomorrow. He is. He's good at it.
You're already looking for it.
He's good at it. No, he is.
Past his career.
He's good at it. He's good at it. But the draft stock, that's going to be very, very interesting to chart because we know the physical tools are there. Obviously, he's mobile.
Athleticism, arm. Yeah.
He has a lot of the tools that I think the NFL wants and requires in this day and age, but wasn't necessarily in a system that highlighted it. Right? We talk about the Penn State game. Only threw the ball 8 times, 9 times in that game.
Yeah.
The system that he was in did not require him to do a whole lot. He certainly could have done more, and he showed in big spots, notably in the playoff, what he can do.
Sure.
So how the NFL sees a guy like that, I think is going to be fascinating for us as we get a little bit deeper into spring.
Yeah, agree. No, I mean, look, we're going to have the first portal window has closed for everybody who didn't have a coach leave their program. You get 30 days after that. So we'll have more portal windows and more coach movement, certainly, and more recruiting stuff coming up. There's, before we know, we'll be into spring ball, but no, will be fascinating to see a lot of these guys, either who gets the job, be it at Arizona, Michigan, whatever, what staffs, I love that word, staffs look like at these places, what Jedd Fisch's staff looks like. No, this is, it's constantly fluid. And, as always, can't wait to see what happens as we enter this brave new world.
The other bit of news that I think was merely a formality, Caleb Williams going pro as well.
Yeah.
And I wanted to end with this conversation about Caleb Williams because we're going to hear a lot about him from people who haven't watched a single game of Caleb Williams. Certainly not to the extent that you and I have. Right? A lot of NFL fans who hear the name, they go on YouTube, they watch the clips. Obviously, the clips are pretty exciting for Caleb Williams.
Yeah, of course.
But I'm curious from our layman's perspective, what kind of a pro is Caleb Williams? Like, given what you saw from him at USC.
And Oklahoma, yeah.
And Oklahoma, sure. Is he the real deal? Is he the product of the Lincoln Riley system? How do you feel about Caleb Williams, just broadly speaking?
I tried to just take him on sort of face level, whatever, to just like, he's real exciting to watch and makes incredible plays.
Yeah.
And I don't really think about these guys. You don't even watch that much NFL, but you certainly watch more than I do. The times that I thought critically about Caleb Williams at USC, there were certainly moments against big teams, medium-sized teams, whatever, where I imagine Lincoln Riley being frustrated a little bit with Caleb Williams for freelancing a play that didn't need freelancing. That perhaps, that the footwork was not necessarily there to, take a drop, step into the pocket, and hit, Mario Williams in stride. That maybe it was because I thought Dan Orlovsky made a couple of good points in talking about him, that because he knew the defense wasn't going to be there for him, that he thought he had to score touchdowns on every play, that it wasn't good enough to hit, a guy up the seam for 12 yards when we need points quickly.
Right.
And so that might have played into Caleb Williams' mentality, that he wasn't always, in rhythm and, making the platform throws that were there, at trying to, go downfield for 53 yards as often as he possibly could. He's not super tall,
No, he's 6'1", like 215, 220. So he doesn't have the quote unquote
prototypical
NFL size, but he can move. The knock on him and the system that he played in is pretty much the same as we've heard for other Kyler Murray, right? It's a one-read system, that type of stuff. And obviously, Caleb Williams, over the course of his career, has had to play a little bit of hero ball, right? We saw that on full display for USC, to your point. So, to what end that matters, doesn't matter. Again, we're not scouts, but I bring this up because I suspect as we get a little bit deeper into the spring months, this is one of those rare points of overlap between college and pro, where college fans who don't really give a lick about the NFL are just interested to see where some of these name brand players go and how they are viewed by scouts at the next level. And I suspect Caleb Williams is going to be a very, very interesting name, not just because he is the projected first round pick at this juncture, but also because there's going to be some debate around him. I don't know if it's a lock that you would take him number one overall. Again, from my 30,000 foot view, just because of the system, because of some of the knocks that I've heard people mention about him. But alas, he makes it official that he's going pro. We expected it. It figures to be a rather loaded quarterback class this year. It's Caleb Williams, it's Drake May, it's Jaden Daniels, it's Bo Nix, it's, we can go right down the list here. JJ McCarthy, Michael Penix, right? Part of the reason why Quinn Ewers decided he's not going pro, because there are already so many quarterbacks that are out there. So will be fascinating to see as we get a little bit deeper into this thing, how these guys stack up.
Also, being the quarterback for the University of Texas does not seem like the worst position in life to be.
Hell no. Hell no.
Here, the only other thing about Caleb Williams is the most obvious thing, and that is he has it, right? He has the whatever indescribable, indefinable it is. And so that he is a gamer. He can improvise. He can make something out of nothing. He can make the impossible look possible. And it's just not that often that you see dudes that have that have that kind of supreme confidence and will to get a play that looks like it has nothing into 27 yards.
There's a little bit of Pat Mahomes in him.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of Pat Mahomes in him.
Yeah, you're there, but you can, that's the most recent comp, however accurate, whatever. But yes, it's the similar quality of on a certain level. If you have Fred Warner bearing down on you or Kyle Hamilton, I just looked at the All-Pro list earlier today. I believe at least Kyle Hamilton is an All-Pro.
Kyle Hamilton's been incredible this season. Yeah.
Okay, so he's like the guy for the Ravens,
safety for the Ravens. Yep, formerly of Notre Dame.
So if you have that level athlete at linebacker, at safety, at defensive end, right? If you have somebody who needs to be able to get away from Aaron Donald, that you kind of need something that's just filled with pixie dust. And say whatever you want about any of the other quarterbacks, it seems like he's the only guy with that pixie dust, right? And there's something that oh man, you kind of need that in today's world if you're going to be a superstar quarterback. Or be Joe Flacco.
There's only 6 good quarterbacks anyway,
Yeah. And now one of them, CJ Stroud.
And one of them,
who
CJ
definitely
Stroud.
has that unwaverable, unshakable confidence in his abilities. And it definitely has the quality you want in a quarterback. And so you're looking for that next guy. And ceiling wise, it seems like Caleb Williams is the Superman of this class.
Write in, let us know. I'm very curious among the verballerhood where people stand on Caleb Williams, and not just USC people. I think we'll even get some dispute among USC people, but we're at Solid Verbal on Twitter, on X, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on all the usual hotspots. You can always, of course, write in solidverbal@gmail.com. And if you're a verballer, you can, of course, comment on this ad-free posting, because this episode's available ad-free at verballers.com. Let us know your thoughts. I'm just genuinely curious where people stand on him, really on any of these quarterbacks. Just let us know who you would take. I'm very interested because my team, the Giants, is picking 6th, and they desperately need a quarterback. Whether or not it comes to that, we'll see. But I'm very interested in this for a multitude of reasons.
Okay. Good luck to you and the G-Men.
All right. Look, great to connect with you. I hope you enjoy your time out in the fairer weather of Southern California.
How is it out there? How you doing
It's
out there?
cold. It's really cold. Yeah, we're getting snow tomorrow. It's really cold. It's like 20 degrees. I went for a walk earlier. I thought I had frostbite. It's very cold. But look.
What a time I had in Pennsylvania, by the way.
Oh.
I got the Ty Hildenbrand reality tour.
You did.
Like, this place is cool. This place is cool. This burrito sucks. This burrito's garbage. Like, I got the whole thing. It was great.
Was it all you wanted it to be and more?
Yes. Yeah. Because you are a very good, like, Chamber of Commerce and Board of Tourism representative. You're like, oh, they actually redid this area, and they do like cool concerts and set up like pop-up shops in the summer at the Bethlehem Steel Stacks or whatever. Like, you did a good job.
Thank you.
I think you represented your place really well.
I am a noted ambassador, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I drive other people crazy, but since this is your first time here, you were okay
Well,
with it.
yeah, in your specific, like, I came in like 10, 12 years ago, but that was
Right.
to like your mom's house to record a show in your childhood basement or your childhood bedroom.
That's right.
So no, I didn't get the same kind of.
No.
Everywhere we go, it's like, oh, hey, Ty, solid verbal, Ty.
When
oh
I was
my God,
in-
Ty.
When I was in my Jedd Fisch apartment with nothing on the walls that I could move out of at a
Yeah.
moment's notice.
That's right, exactly. Your crash pad of an apartment. Yeah, you seem to have settled in to an actual permanent house now, which is nice. You have a lovely wife. You have a lovely dog. You set up your studio. You got a backyard there. It's all happening for Ty Hildenbrand in PA.
All right. Well, enjoy your time out there. Say hello to Mr. and Mrs. Rubenstein for me.
I will.
And for all of you listening out there, whether it is hot or cold or snowy or sunny, wherever it finds you, thank you so much for downloading, for listening, for supporting the show. We'll be back on Thursday. In the meantime, stay solid.
Peace.